So we are going to be talking about something a little different tonight that does have to do with this series on relationships, and it's got to do with like what are the things that kind of are driving us inside that we're probably not aware of. If you've ever taken a Myers-Briggs personality inventory, you know, like it sort of tells you what your natural self is, you know. So you don't generally learn to be extroverted because of things that happen to you. You know, you are an extrovert or you're an introvert or whatever it is that's within those categories. You know, that's who you are because it's who you are. But what we're talking about tonight is something different, you know, and it's not like, you know, like an inventory is kind of like when you go and you go to a doctor's office for the first time. And I don't know about you, but when there's like 3 pages on those clipboards and they hand you a pen and you feel like you're going to need another pen, and they start off and you're feeling like you may feel a little funky or whatever, but I mean, like, by the time you get done reading that list, you feel way worse than when you went in there, amen? I mean, do you have diabetes, high blood pressure? Have you ever had this? Have you ever had this? Have you ever had this? If it's like 3/4 of what's on there, I don't even know what it is. You know, it's like, and I'm not really sure I want to. But when all that goes on, you know, you're like taking stock of stuff that belongs to you. Well, what we're talking about tonight with these personal drivers has to do with a story that has been written into you along the way in your life, probably for most of us before the age of 14 or 15. There are some circumstances that would change that, but probably between 14 up to 14 or 15. And this has to do with this story that's being written into your life, has to do with events that you've lived through or things that have happened to you in that period of time that you may or may not be completely aware of. You've probably done a decent job of learning how to sort of work with what it is that was happening to you. You've learned to be, I guess the word I would use is adaptive. And so we're going to be talking about those stories that have been written into us that we're probably not aware of. And so the name for what I'm going to be talking about tonight is called Schemas. And the book, if you want to read more about this, the better read is a book called Reinventing Your Life, and it's by a guy named Jeffrey Young. He developed schemas and what they're all about, and the book is now available on Kindle as well as in paperback. We have some of them available in our office if you think this will be helpful to you. And we can also do more work with any of you individually. If you'd like to learn more about this for yourself, we can walk you through how to get out what your schemas are and go through them with you. But that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. So schemas. There are there are 18, I believe, schemas or narratives that sort of generalize what happens to most of us. Those fall into what are called domains or large areas that they kind of bracket under. And I'm going to teach all 4 of the domains tonight and kind of give you the biggest of the schemas that go underneath them. Not all of them, but the biggest ones. There are more than the ones I'm going to be talking about. But the first domain is called disconnection and rejection. Schemas, or these narratives, in this domain result from this: early experiences of a detached, explosive, unpredictable, or abusive family environment. What does that mean? It could mean something like your parents went through a divorce and one of them, you know, left contact with you. It could mean that one of your parents just walked out and left altogether. It could mean that one of your parents died. It could mean that, that one of your parents struggled with chemical addiction or another kind of a compulsion. It could mean any or all of those things. But what the takeaway that's the most important is that you grew up believing, or somewhere along the way, as time went along, you started believing that the environment that you would call home, or the environment that Hallmark paints as home and as a safe place to go, right, isn't and wasn't a safe place to go. And most of us try to find a way to minimize that. One of the ways I ask that question when I'm talking to people about this is, I'm like, tell me about how often you brought your friends to your house. Did your friends come to your house a lot? And when someone goes, you know, I really don't remember that. And then you go, well, do you think that, I mean, did you have friends there every week? You know, I really don't know. Or people will say, you know, no, they never came to my house. Well, why didn't they come to your house? Well, they didn't come to my house because it just seemed like things were a little wacky at my house or a little crazy at my house, and I really wasn't sure if I wanted friends at my house. It was easier for me to go to their house, right? You know something about that, right? You've heard that from people before. That would be kind of what this is talking about. And so some of the schemas that come out of this area have to do with things like abandonment. There's more of a definition of this. It goes, people with these schemas expect that their needs for security, safety, stability, nurturance, and empathy in intimate or family relationships will not be met in a consistent or predictable way. So the place that ought to be safe isn't safe. So yeah, abandonment would be one of the schemas that comes out of this. I feel like people are generally gonna leave me, and if they haven't left me, they might. So what does that cause me to do? It causes me to always be on my guard emotionally, right? It causes me to say, I don't really wanna get that close to anybody because they may leave me in the end. They may not want to be with me in the end. So now people in my life, everything about those relationships is kind of going to be guarded. Mistrust, abuse would be another part of this domain, where I believe that the people that are around me always have dangerous capacities to them, and they may hurt me or harm me in some way. Emotional deprivation has to do with me believing that, you know, I'm going to have to figure out how to get my own needs met, because other people simply aren't going to do that for me. And so I mostly feel in relationships that I'm on my own. You know, I mostly feel that I'm on my own. So that, you know, those are probably the larger areas that occur out of that quadrant. The second quadrant is this: impaired autonomy and performance. Well, what does it mean? Here we go. The typical family of origin that is like that is enmeshed, meaning very stuck together, undermining the child's judgment, or overprotective. So in this area, what's happening is I've created a family environment where people they might feel like they're safe, but they're definitely restricted. You know, they're definitely restricted to a high understanding of the value that you're supposed to place on what your family thinks, what your family says, what your family believes, and you're supposed to be in lockstep with that, right? Like you're being trained up as another family soldier. Does that make sense? You're being trained up to think, react, respond, feel, do the right way. You know, everybody in our family is a doctor. Everybody in our family is this. Everybody in our family is that, and I'm supposed to be that. Everyone went to this place for school, and I'm supposed to do that. Or everyone didn't do this, and I'm not supposed to do that. But all of that has to do with a high belief that I'm only going to accept you in our family if you do the right thing that you're supposed to do at the right time, right? So there can be a lot of, in a family situation like that, there can be a lot of judgment, and there can be a lot of critique, and there's a whole lot of a desire to restrain the kid that is growing up from independence, independent thinking, even independent feeling, and independent action. Are you following me? That's what this is kind of. That's what this is kind of about. And so, you know, like people that have that going on, they're going to struggle They're going to struggle with that belief that I can be okay. I can be okay by myself. I can be okay by myself. And man, that's hard. Like it makes people dependent. It makes people feel a general sense of incompetence, like I'm not really okay on my own. It makes people feel vulnerable sometimes to feeling like it's highly possible that if I am out here by myself now, bad things could happen to me. Because I've been raised to believe that the only real safety is in that family unit. It could cause me to not be able to develop myself. And so when I leave the family, let's just say your whole family lives in Knoxville. And so you've always lived in Knoxville, and your uncles and aunts live here, and your grandparents live here, and your mom and dad live here, and that's just the way it's supposed to be. And everybody lives within 3 miles of each other. And all of a sudden, you get a job in Augusta, Georgia. I don't know where. And it's hot there, by the way. But you get a job in Augusta, Georgia. And you bring it up. You bring it up at Sunday dinner. And this is the look you get. Like, what are you talking about, Lewis? Why would you go to Augusta, Georgia? Aren't there good jobs here in Knoxville? Why do you feel like you got to go to Augusta? What's the matter with you? What do you think is going to happen there? I've heard it's really expensive there. Everybody always says that when it's not where you want them to be. Am I right? It's really expensive there. It's like, well, it's not really expensive in Augusta, Georgia. I could rattle off the list of where it's expensive. If somebody tells you it's expensive to live in San Francisco, it is. If they tell you it's expensive to live in New York, it is. If they tell you it's expensive to live in San Diego, it really is. It is. But if they tell you it's expensive to live in Augusta, it's not. But that's the kind of thing you're going to hear, right? Whatever you would say where you would be stepping out, quote, on your own, it's not going to be appropriate, adequate, or right. It's going to be the wrong thing to do. Because the right thing to do, and the only thing to do in this domain, is to support the overall effort of the family. And if you decided that you were going to step out on your own and not do what your family did, or not do what you were supposed to do, or not follow in the plan of what your family thought you should do, guess what's going to happen? You're not going to get that kind of approval. You're not going to have somebody saying to you, well, it's your life. And even if something happens, and it doesn't work out, I'm going to support you and I'm going to love you. In a system like this, approval is based on being homogenous in the way we think. In other words, being of the same mind. That's how you get approval in this system, is you are all of the same mind. Are you following me? And if you decide you're going to step out of that single-mindedness, well, this is going to be a struggle. This is going to be a struggle. So, see that all the time in people that never really feel okay about making their own decisions. Because unless mom and daddy are okay with it, well, how can it be right? And if I might be still having to do it, but I'm going to walk around feeling what? Guilt about the fact that I'm not honoring the family system. I'm not aware of why I'm feeling that way, but that explains it. Next arena is called impaired limits. Schemas in this section relate to deficiencies in internal limits, respect and responsibility to others, or meeting realistic personal goals. The typical family origin is permissiveness and indulgence. It's like this would be getting involved in a family system where people did whatever they wanted to do that basically made them content, happy, satisfied, or whatever, at the far extreme of what I was talking about previously, where there is no real serious regard for others, but if it is right for me, well, then I'm going to do it. And this is the person that's going to go, nobody is going to tell me what to do. So by the time this person is in the 7th grade, I mean, they may go to school, they may not go to school. They may turn in homework, they may not. If the teacher goes, well, can you tell me, why you didn't turn in that, that paper on that story? Well, yeah, I just didn't feel like it. I just did not feel. I'll show you the opposite of this deal in a minute, but I just didn't really feel like it. I mean, you've met people like that, haven't you? I mean, some of that is us. Like impaired limits means I do whatever it is that I think is going to benefit me and make me feel good at that time. And that comes, from that history of a family structure or a growing up structure of people around you, if it wasn't your family of origin, where people weren't maybe that serious about dedicating energy into helping you to understand how to stay healthy. How to stay healthy and how to treat and respect others in such a way that you're going to develop healthy, rich relationships. So some of the things that go along with this domain are like entitlement or grandiosity. I believe that the world belongs to me. The company that I work for, it's an okay company for me to work for them as long as I get the days off that I want, I get the hours of work that I want, I do the job that I want, you pay me what I want, and you leave me alone all day long so that I can do what I want. And if none of those things work out, guess what's going to happen if that's kind of the story that's been written into me? I'm not going to stay there. And guess who I'm going to complain about when I leave that job? The job. And 10 jobs later that I've been through in 2.5 years, guess whose fault it's going to be at job number 10 that I left that job or I got fired? It can't be mine, right? I mean, I can't be responsible for anything that happens because you got to remember, I get to do what I want. And it's just that people don't understand me and don't understand the way that I see it, or it's someone that that grandiosity means is someone's like, they always have the next big thing. When Tupperware was hot, they were into Tupperware stuff. Then the next thing's hot, they're into that. They've always got the $1 million scheme just around the corner. They've always got, I mean, I bet I have seen now 200 different ways of somebody talking to me about Amway. And it started changing a few years ago because they changed their name to something else. And you go, is this Amway? Oh, no. Like, I just wonder if I could come over and maybe take you to lunch, just talk about this. Like, it's just, and here's the word they're going to use, it's an opportunity. And so then you go, are you sure this isn't Amway? Well, no, I mean, like, the history of it used to be that, but I mean, like, and so I will go on and my out will be like, my outs that I believe ought to hold every time, but they do not, is number one, I believe that if I get called for jury duty and I say I'm a pastor, that should get me out of jury duty automatically. It does not. I've learned that it does not. The other thing I would think is if you're selling Amway and it's a peer sales system, and I say to you, man, I need you to understand, like, I would never do that as the pastor of a church. That would just be something I would never, I know a lot of pastors that are doing it. And I'm like thinking, I wish to God they weren't, because then you wouldn't be coming to me. But it's that entitlement thing, and grandiosity is, I believe I'm going to make $1 billion some way that nobody else knows about because I'm smarter, faster, stronger, and more free to do it than anybody else. Insufficient self-control or self-discipline. I don't believe that rules or laws were made for me. I believe that they were made for somebody else. If it says, I am shocked when the state patrol pulls me over on my way to Newport and I'm doing 92, the guy that pulls me over is the idiot because I was only going 92. And the guy goes, sir, do you realize how fast you were going? And you, of course you realize you've been staring at the deal the whole way. And you go, well, no, I have no clue. And he goes, well, I just gunned you at 92. Oh, well, what is the speed limit? And And the dude goes, well, it ain't 92. This isn't the Autobahn. It's not 92. And you end up, he leaves, and you end up calling your friend, telling your friend what an idiot the state cop was for pulling you over and writing you a $200 ticket. That's you. Because you don't believe that you believe that you operate above society. You believe that you operate above the parameters of the law. You operate above fairness. You operate above, you are on a different plane than responsibility, and that's you. So here's the next one. Other directedness. A bunch of us in this room have this going on, trust me. Schemas in this domain relate to an excessive focus. Get ready, codependents. An excessive focus on meeting the needs of others at the expense of one's own needs. The typical family of origin is based on conditional acceptance, whereby children suppress normal needs and emotions in order to gain attention, approval, and love. Children suppress normal individual needs in order to gain acceptance, approval, and love by trying to do everything for everybody else except themselves. And what does that create for us? That is eventually going to create resentments. And what am I going to do with my resentments? For a while, I'm going to work harder to be a better codependent and see if that'll resolve my resentment. And when it does not, my resentments are going to grow. And when they do, I'm not going to really understand why it is I seem to be out of sorts, why it is I seem to be out of whack, why it is I seem to be tense and anxious and unsure of myself, and why it is I seem to be having a problem taking myself seriously. So in this regard, there's a similarity to me taking myself seriously out of me taking everybody else seriously, and what we talked about earlier, which is I believe that I can only relate to the needs and the wants of my family. So some of the functions that occur out of this, have to do with like what's called subjugation. You surrender your control of your own life to other people and what they really want for you. Self-sacrifice. Lots of us are good at that. We decide we're going to make a sacrifice for somebody else to be okay, and our needs get unmet. We're not aware of it until it becomes a crisis for us. Approval seeking. Got any approval seekers in here? Or recognition seeking. I'm looking for a way for you to tell me that I'm really okay because I'm not allowed to really work for that for myself because that would make me look selfish. Are you following that? That would make me look selfish. So that's what gives in this arena. In the other arena, the last one, is called overvigilance and inhibition. Schemas in this domain involve an excessive focus of controlling, suppressing, or ignoring one's emotions and spontaneous feelings in order to avoid making mistakes or meeting rigid internalized rules. Typical family origins are domination and suppression of feelings, or a bleak environment where performance standards and self-control take priority over pleasure and playfulness. So I come home, and my sister, it wasn't this way in my family, but if it would have been bad because my oldest sister was she was a legit math and science like genius, and so when you walked into a classroom where, God forbid, the teacher had her as a student, you would go through the room on the first day of class, right? And they would go, well, so you introduce yourself, so I go, Mark Beebe. Mark Beebe. Do you know, are you related to Beth Beebe? I mean, it got to the point by my junior year, I kind of wanted to go, no, I never heard of her. No. I mean, you knew it would come back, so what are you going to do? But, you know, you go, yeah. So she's your sister. I go, yeah. She was a wonderful student. I mean, she did more than was even expected of her. She was just a problem solver. She even helped us teach the class once in a while. She was a great tutor for other students. She was just amazing. And I'd be sitting there in like chemistry class going, expect absolutely none of that from Mark Beebe, all right? Because, like, it ain't going to happen, Slick. I'm just trying to get out of here alive. I mean, like, if they would have had pass-fail in high school, I'd have been all over it in that class. That, Spanish, and I can give you a couple of more. You know, like, I mean, I barely could pass typing. I mean, that's the way it went. But Beth was a superstar at that. And, man, you know, that was the thing was that if I would have grown up in a family where all of us were supposed to be like Beth, it would have been a nightmare. I mean, she was so talented. She went through her sophomore year of college, right? She then decided she wanted to be a nurse. So she got into the Rochester School of Nursing, one of the top 4 or 5 schools of nursing in the United States. She goes there. In November, she calls my dad and she goes, my mom and dad, and she goes, I think I made a mistake. I don't think I want to be a nurse. And this is November, and my dad goes, well, do you think you can get through the semester? No. And it's, you know, firstborn, you get a semester. So she comes home. My dad goes, you got to get a job. She gets a job in one day. You know, works it all the way through Christmas, does great. My dad goes, you really want to try to see if you can, you know, get back to your degree where you were and see if you can, like, you know, finish at least one semester extra. This is before you could take classes online. This is before all the AP and all this. So she was a full semester behind, working on a science degree. What does she do? She never gets below an A the whole rest of the way in college. She finishes on time and with all kinds of honors. Like, if you grew up in a situation where you have a sibling like that or a parent like that, and the expectation is that that is supposed to be you, and you're only going to get affirmation if that is you, things are going to get jacked up, right? I mean, they're going to get jacked up. You're going to develop a sense of, some of the stuff's going to happen, you're going to develop a sense of negativity about life and probably about yourself, because it's like, how am I ever going to get there? How is that ever going to be accomplished? You know, emotional inhibition is a part of this. That has to do with, I don't ever really know how I feel because everything is so performance-based for me that I've sort of forgotten to take my own feelings seriously. This is probably top 5 that we see here. Something called unrelenting standards. Unrelenting standards would be the hit parade for all of us in here that are outright perfectionists. Like, there are a lot more people that say they're perfectionists than really are perfectionists, because we kind of like saying it. But if you're a perfectionist, you know the burden that it brings. Amen? You know the unhappiness that it brings. You know the out of controlness that can come along with this. Punitiveness is another piece of this arena, which is the belief that I just don't deserve the kind of joy and fun and excitement that other people do. You know, I don't deserve the opportunity to have a good time. I really don't deserve joy in my life because I haven't worked hard enough for it. And the best that I can kind of hope for is a sense of accomplishment. Like, can you enjoy the moment? Or is it true that when you accomplish something, the only thing you can think about is, how am I going to keep this going? How am I going to be able to pull this off next month? How am I going to be able to do this again? What's going to happen to me if I can't accomplish this, again? So those are all the main areas of schemas. Like I said, there's 18 of them all together. If you want to read more about it, get that book, Reinventing Your Life. We have it. Or get it online, Kindle or paperback. We also can, as I said, we can do this with you individually if you would like to be able to do that. I want to close with something that I read that has to do with Psalm 139. Psalm 139 talks about, you ought to read it sometime. It talks about the way that God made us and how much God loved us before we were even on the planet, and the way that God meticulously put you together, and how well God knows you, and how much God loves you. And so this girl writes this story about what happened to her. She was bullied from about the 5th grade on, or 6th grade. She goes, for me, the bullying started around my 6th grade year of school. It was a truly brutal experience. Coming home to tears every day was certainly hard to comprehend, especially for a girl of my age. After attending a church revival, I had a divine transformation inside of me. One that looked at the enemy as powerless, and one that viewed my God as the mighty warrior who would fight my battles for me. Sitting in school, it was sometimes miserable seeing the way other kids talked and laughed with their friends, knowing that mine didn't exist. Continuing into middle school, it continued more and more. But one thing that didn't continue in me was the depression. I had found a God who fought my battles for me. One that whispered in my ear daily, Kayla, don't forget that you were fearfully and wonderfully made. And man, what we're talking about tonight, these are not, none of these schemas are indictments. They just are the stories that have been written into us. But you know what we're here to do at Recovery? We're here to write a new story, amen? We're here to say, Jesus, we need you to write a new story into our hearts. That's what we need. And you know what? If we're willing, he's able. And I don't know what story that you're living with tonight, but I know there's a new one and a better one that Jesus can write for you. We're going to open up the space in front of me for some prayer. And man, that will be a great conversation to have with him. Is, you know what, I'm thinking I need a new story. It's important to understand the stories I'm talking about tonight and know how they're influencing us, but that in the end, you know, once we know how we're wired and why we're wired, you know, it's time for a rewiring that sets us free and makes us full. Thanks for being here tonight. In Jesus' sweet name, amen.